Now podcast, and I'm your host Gene, and we're back with an old friend of mine. Many of you may not know or know him. If you possibly live in Alabama, you might. This is an old friend of mine who I know from years and years ago. This is Mr. Russell Wall. Russell, how are you?
Gene, my man, it's good to see you. It's been a long time. I grew up in Georgia, but I've been here in Alabama the last 15 years and happy to see you and your podcast.
Man, well, I was happy to hear that you even listened to a little bit of it. So that was
Now I was impressed. You got a wide variety of interests and hobbies, and I suddenly got nervous. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but you've got a wide variety of things going. So I was impressed.
well, that is sort of the purpose of it, which for better or worse might be the downfall of this podcast. I don't know because some people want to have a gardening podcast, a car podcast, and
Sure.
I'm just all over the place. Like
Well,
you're
that's life. I think we all have a variety of interests. And so I found it refreshing that it wasn't just one thing or another.
right, right,
It's challenging. I mean, I do radio. It's Christian music radio. And over the
right.
years, I've done sports and news talk and music. But I've always felt bad for like the traffic reporters, just like one traffic report after another. You have to speak so quickly, so concisely, and say the same thing. We know there's traffic. I don't know how they do it. That or the weather.
Yeah. Well, the weather is like being the quarterback, or I'm sorry, the coach that has to go for it or not go for it on 4th and 1, right?
Right, right. You gotta you,
Because
you gotta have a decision to make. Which way are we going? And everybody's gonna be mad at you.
yeah, I mean, they're either going to think you're the smartest person in the world or the dumbest person in the world if you get
Sure.
that
There
wrong.
was a 30% chance of rain. 30% of the people got rain. I'm sorry you didn't. Don't be mad at me.
Uh-huh. Oh man. All right. Let's just start from the beginning a little bit.
Sure.
You touched on it. You're from Atlanta area. As much as you want to. I mean, we don't want to. I mean, I don't want to give everybody your social number, but
Sure.
what? Just tell us about how you grew up and
Yeah. Well,
your
yeah,
background.
we'll kind of start here. So I grew up in Stone Mountain, Georgia, across the street from your cousin, and we may touch on him later. But yeah, so I grew up there, went to Shiloh High School, class of 95. So, I mean, I'm growing up in the 80s, high school in the 90s, went to the University of Georgia, speech communication,
Go
active,
dogs.
go dogs. But I will tell you, I think of football as a good TV show. For some reason or another, I grew up as a Tech fan, the only one in my family, and I think that's
Okay.
because I'm a middle child. And so everybody else had carved out their love of the Bulldogs. So at some point, and I don't even remember when I did this, I picked Georgia Tech with no desire to go there and not knowing the first thing about them. Maybe I like their colors. It's weird. As a kid, sometimes you have things you like and you remember liking them, but you don't know why you like them. I don't know why I picked Georgia Tech. So I go to Georgia, which I loved. I never wanted to go to Tech. But even when I went to Georgia, I was never specifically a Bulldogs fan. So part of my life, I have always been a little bit of the odd man out, even among the people I know and love. So, but
Hmm.
I was in ministry, University of Georgia Christian Campus Fellowship for a time,
Hmm.
and I worked at a Christian church in Oconee County as a youth pastor in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then made a trip out here to Birmingham in 2008. But yeah, I got kind of getting out of college. I got into radio. I worked in Athens on a station called Magic 1021 that's still there to this day, but I've been gone for about 15 years. Um, but it was fun. So grew up in Stone Mountain, Gwinnett County boy. Georgia is home, but Alabama is every bit as much home now. And I go back and forth nearly every weekend from Birmingham to Atlanta to see my people. And
Hmm.
I'm a road warrior, Gene. I'm on the road all the time.
Well, let me ask you this then,
Sure.
because I'm sure you get asked this question a lot just in private, but how did you transition? I guess it sounded like ministry to radio, or how did you get
Yeah,
into the radio gig full time?
sure, sure. So growing up, I grew up with a dad who worked very hard at a job he didn't seem to like. Now, later I realized, he was, whatever job we have, it kind of breaks us down to a degree. But I grew up with my dad and my friends' dads seeming to work very hard and not always seeming particularly happy. Um,
Mm.
and I appreciate their efforts. But my dad loved radio. So he was a bread man by trade. And so he was always on the go. He was in a truck. And if I was with him, the radio was on. And so kind of how I've always told it is it seemed to make him happy. And I thought, well, that seems like a fun thing to do. Now, I didn't grow up planning to get into radio. A lot of people have an idea of what they want to be. I had an ever increasing list of what I didn't want to be. So I just kept crossing things off. And eventually, kind of what was left was radio broadcaster. Now, that didn't happen until 2 or 3 years into college. But I grew up in the church. And so I knew that my faith was important to me. I had a youth minister who meant the world to me. So there was a part of me that wanted to follow in his footsteps. And so eventually how I landed was I thought ministry was deeply important to the small number of people that I would minister to. Radio was important in a day-to-day shallow way, but widespread since, hence the broadcasting. So I kind of thought I wanted to be I didn't want to interrupt your day. I didn't want you to stop doing what you were doing. I wanted to help make you happy as you went to do the thing you might otherwise not want to do. And so for a time I was doing radio and ministry. And then here in Birmingham, the opportunity came to blend the two, which was Christian music. And then for a time I did a talk station. I don't want to say it was Christian talk, but it was news talk with a bunch of Christians. So we talked about the issues of the day, but it wasn't Bible teaching specifically. But our conversation was often influenced by the Bible teaching we'd all received.
Right. And how'd you like doing that? Is that one of the more fun jobs you had, or was it sort of always a stress to figure out topics and?
Yeah, the topics were never the stress. It was fun, but a couple of things took me by surprise. So my dad loved talk radio, so I learned at a young age to love talk radio, in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect. But in Atlanta, I listened to Neil Bortz and Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and all these guys. And I thought, I'd love to do that. It wasn't that I was specifically politically minded, but I liked what they did and I wanted to do something similar. But in the, 5 years or so of doing it, two things came to mind. One was people are too angry way too early in the morning. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be informed, and I'm okay with being opinionated, but I just love a conversation. I in no way ever need to agree with someone. I'm just happy to hear you out. I'm a curious person. I would love to know how you arrived at the destination where you are. I think you're a curious person as well. So I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want to misrepresent someone with a different viewpoint. I don't think I should have to, if we disagree, I don't think I should have, and I'm so convinced I'm right, I shouldn't have to misrepresent your viewpoint to convince you of mine. And so oftentimes I would find myself having to defend positions among my co-hosts and audience, defend positions that weren't even mine, just because I didn't feel like people were being fair in their discussion of them. And then Trump comes on the scene in 2015. And from 2015, he comes down that escalator. We didn't have a day on talk radio that he wasn't the story. I eventually left talk radio in 2017, 18. Right. And, we had a great time with it. Him running for office, him entering office, but it was no longer fun. It was just the same thing every day. And it surprised me, for as much as I loved the conversation and taking the phone calls, no one ever changed my mind, and I never changed anyone else's mind. And I thought, what are we doing? What are we doing? I'm devoting so much of my time changing no one's mind. And really what I wanted to do is just have fun. I heard this recently. I didn't know this at the time, but this kind of captured it. I may not be able to change your actions or your mind, but hopefully I can change your attitude. If I can, help put you in a brighter mood, that's good enough for me. And so I realized News Talk wasn't going to make that happen as it was happening where I was.
Yeah, and I think you go to a lot of good points there, especially I think a lot of people are more interested in interesting conversation and being in a better mood than just, some people do love to gravitate toward the the dirt, if you will.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I think I think that's a good point. One of the things that reminded me when I got in touch with you was another Alabama. I don't know exactly where they're based out of. I think Birmingham area.
Yeah.
Rick and Bubba came to mind.
Sure,
I'm
sure,
sure
sure.
they're a icon out there in the
They
Birmingham area.
are. They are. So they are actually wrapping up their show here
Uh-huh.
the end of 2024, and Rick Burgess of Rick and Bubba, I think, will continue on the show, and Bubba will go on to do different things. When I arrived in 2008, I think they were probably 15 years in, kind of at the height of their success. I mean, they've continued to be, but they were firmly rooted. So they were new to me.
Hmm.
And at that time, when I worked in morning radio as well, we had the same hour. So I never actually heard Rick and Bubba, but I heard of them, and
Ah,
people love them, and they're beloved now. And they have a fun song, Rick and Bubba, that they
oh
do their
yeah.
thing. But yeah, I mean, I've seen them on stage. I'm aware of them. I don't know that I've ever met them in person,
Hmm.
but the city of Birmingham and those affiliates they have nationwide they're blessing a lot of people.
Yeah, I just discovered them I'd heard of them for years, I think,
Yeah.
off and on, and then I tuned into them, if you will, about a year or so ago. So
Okay.
I had not been very familiar with them or their story or what their shtick is, if you will.
Yeah.
But what I've listened to, yeah, they get into politics, but I do like that they just talk about their lives. They just talk about what's
Yeah.
going.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is kind of what I like is sometimes for men there it doesn't seem to be as enough room for just talk of life. It
Right.
seems to have to be sports or have to be politics. And I guess you could have like a Dave Ramsey or a Clark Howard where there's a talk of financial issues as well. But all of
Yeah.
us, we have a wide variety of issues and responsibilities. And so I love these conversations. And maybe that's why
Hmm.
podcasts have become so popular is that there is room and it's not just the headlines of the day. There's consideration of those things, but
Right.
you're not bound to any particular format.
Yeah, yeah, I agree because that's what I do with this one with my co-host Jason. Um, is we just shoot the breeze a lot of times. I mean,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
we pick topics. Like sometimes we'll talk about '80s music or
Sure.
whatever, but a lot of times we're just trying to shoot the breeze and just like one good example I thought of with Rick and Bubba was the other day. Rick was talking about how he went down to his farmhouse. He was just going to go down there to have a good time, forget about life because he'd had a stressful week or something.
Sure.
And he talks about how he proceeded to go out on his ATV, I guess, and one of the wheels fell into a hole, and
Oh
and so he had to walk like 60 acres back to his
no.
farmhouse to get another vehicle to get it out of the hole, and then he had to go back to take the
That
thing
is
back, and then he had to
brutal.
walk back to get the ATV.
Sure.
And
Oh,
so
that is
I mean, he took like 30 minutes to talk about that, but
sure.
that's what I mean by interesting,
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. And it's funny. And so I've done radio that news talk would be long form. You can take a topic and you just expound, expound, expound. Whereas music radio that I'm on now is
Mhm.
how quickly and concisely can you make your point. And so both are equally challenging in their own ways. And I think one has helped me to learn to do the other and vice versa. So
Uh,
it's forced me to be versatile as a broadcaster because when you haven't done either, and then you become proficient in one, but if you haven't done, they're different things. Similar, I think, guess you could think of music radio, DJ stuff as kind of like the 100-meter dash. It is a sprint. The moment you start talking, it's how do we finish 90 seconds from now? Play a song, come back and talk some more later. Whereas talk radio is more of the marathon. And there are certain things in how you do it. You kind of break up your hour into segments, quarter hour kind of thing. So you're not necessarily talking just for 3 or 4 hours, but it is different. And so having done music radio now for 5 years and not done talk radio in a long time, even in my regular everyday conversations, it's hard for me to stay engaged for more than 2 or 3 minutes because I'm ready to move on to the next thing.
oh, now, are you married or kids or at all? Or are you
So
still single?
yeah, I was married for 10, 12, I guess it was 13 years. had a couple of great kids, and I was happily married, and then it didn't go the way I would have liked. That's about 10 years ago.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm now currently I've got a sweetheart who lives in Georgia. We've been together for 7 years, not married, but she's part of my back and forth to Georgia from Birmingham
That
most
makes
weekends.
sense. Yeah.
And I've got twins. They're high school seniors in Canton,
Oh,
and
congrats for them. Okay.
yeah, we're looking forward to college. Some good SAT scores and AP credits, and we're hoping for some
Hmm.
good schools. We'll see.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't know. I
Yeah,
didn't realize you had. Did you say girls?
twins, one of each. One of
Okay.
each.
Do
Yeah.
are they starting the pick school process yet, or are they
So
in?
yeah, we're looking. And I, of course, would love in-state tuition. Thank you very much. We got the
Yeah.
Hope Grant. Thank you, Zell Miller. We can
Uh-huh.
make that happen. So my son is angling for Georgia Tech.
Uh-huh.
He would love that. And I think, yeah, if you were to ask me 2 months ago, I would have said, well, that's great. You might want to have a backup plan. But some of his scores, I think he may get it. He's got some other places he wants to apply. And then my daughter, equally talented, she visited Vanderbilt with a friend, and I'm like, well, that's great. I don't know who's paying for Vanderbilt, so if she can work that out, that'd be great. But
Uh-huh.
we'll see. Whether they end up there or at Kennesaw State, it doesn't matter to me. I just want them to be happy and pursue things that are interesting to them.
Right.
I'm proud of them already. We talk of this often of like, you don't have to win me over. You won me over kind of at your birth and everyday sense. So I'm just thrilled to know them, which is silly to say about your own kids, I guess, in some respects, but
Yeah, yeah.
they're dynamite, and I can't wait to see what the Lord has for them.
Right, right. Yeah, well that's really cool. I have small kids, and so they're
Yeah.
not even middle school age yet. So
Yeah.
I get to we're going toward that projectional area, not even on the radar yet.
Yeah.
We're
Tell
still
me, and I'm sure you talk about some of this, but kind of what are some of the challenges from them, or even for yourself as a dad, as a parent in general? Kind of
yeah.
how's it all playing out for you?
I try to remember that each and every day as we go through the daily spectrum of life because
Yeah.
it's like chaos mixed in with just messiness, and then
Yeah.
just at times it's just like a chorus of everybody's on the same page and we're having fun. Yeah, yeah.
What you tell me this? Tell me this, because this is what I see. Now, this is just my point of view.
Uh-huh.
But I would say the families that tend to have more than two or three, I'm always so impressed with how well their families operate. So, kind of behind the scenes, it may be chaos, but like when I go to church, if there's like a family with one or two kids, oftentimes the kids are bonkers. But then I'll see someone show up with 5 kids, and they're all put together, and they sit quietly, and they're cooperating. And I don't know if it's the work of the Holy Spirit. I don't know how we got there, but
Right.
I am just impressed, because I would just assume that it would only get more challenging. And yet it seems oftentimes larger families, by God's grace, have found a way to make it work.
Mm. I find that for one thing, you know, picking a good wife that this is the advice that I tell any younger single people are, you know, yes, it's great to pick a wife you're attracted to, whatever. Pick a wife also that you think will be good at raising kids. Because
Smart. Yeah.
if you get a wife that is going to be clueless yet wants to have 6 kids, you're just begging for a shipwreck, in my
That's
opinion.
true. That's
And
true.
and nobody's perfect, and she's not perfect, and I'm not
Yeah.
perfect. But I will say that setting those expectations, setting those boundaries, and we do get compliments from people at church that our kids are well behaved during the
Good.
church service. Now
Good.
I see every last flaw of what they're doing, and it's always a
Sure.
balancing
Yeah.
act of chaos.
Well, I don't want to assume, but kind of what you said rings true to me, is that I think for any area of life, now this comes with raising kids and grandkids, but just anything, is quickly addressing an issue. So instead of waiting until it becomes this big thing,
Mm,
kind of the moment, not that you're just pouncing on them, but let's correct it quickly. It's just easier if we correct it quickly. And
mhm.
so I it's not to say there aren't going to be big problems, but I would rather deal with it when it's
Yeah.
a small problem than wait till it's a big one.
Yeah. If anything, I think sometimes the grayer issues are harder, which you would know this being a parent of kids that are over 8, 16,
Yeah.
17. Um, when you get down, I mean, the harder issues are fine. Don't hit your brother. You don't hit people. You don't yell in people's faces.
Sure.
You don't scream in their ear randomly. Things like that. That those are easy to nip in the bud, so to speak.
Sure.
But it's when you get to the gray ones of, but I want to watch another show, but you've already
Sure.
watched it 3 times.
Sure. Sure.
When you get to those areas of the outer boundaries, that's when it's kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah, it can be hard of if I can say yes, I want to say yes, but if I said no, it's no. And it's not, it's not the strong arm, it's the iron fist. It's not that, but
right.
yeah, and you do have to weigh things of, all right, am I trying to win this battle or am I trying to win the relationship with my child?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's going to lead me to one conclusion or another.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's good because I think for any parent, and this goes for anybody listening that's about to be a parent or younger parent, and I think Russell would agree with me, you have to weigh out, and it's going to be a struggle of not being, you've got 2 ends of the spectrum, tyrant or doormat,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
that in between area is just a place you have to feel out and figure out as you're going
Yeah.
along a lot of times.
No, it's true. And yeah, kind of where I struggle is, trying to figure that out. I want to be not just with my kids, with anybody. I want to be flexible.
Mhm.
I want to lead, but I also want to serve. I'm also happy to yield. If
Yeah.
we're walking past one another in the hallway, whoever you are, I'm going to yield to you. If we're reaching the door at the same time, if we're in traffic, I just want to have the role of you first. But sometimes you also have to say, no, that's not good. I want you to have what you want, but what you want isn't good for you. And trying to figure that out can be a real challenging thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially with our adult friendships, because sometimes, let's just be honest. Sometimes we have friends that we've grown up with or family, and
Sure.
they're extra, as they call it, or they're special.
Well,
so to
I
speak.
was talking on my show today that there are some things that at worst are neutral
Uh-huh.
and at best are positive. And you think of like an air freshener. An air freshener that you like is great. At worst, it runs out of its fragrance and we're at neutral, but it's not smelling bad.
Yeah.
Then you think of like spoiled milk. Okay, milk doesn't smell particularly good to begin with. So even when it's good, it doesn't smell great. But then it just gets increasingly worse. And we can be that as people. And I said I had a member of my family, and I don't want to mention because it doesn't matter, but
Right.
I described them as like a flu shot. Now, the flu shot or any shot, it doesn't always hurt, but it never feels good.
Yeah.
And so interacting with that person would be a real challenge because, okay, sometimes are better than others, but none of them are ever fun. So at best, it wasn't bad. And so I don't want to be that kind of person with others. I hope at worst, it was a neutral experience. I don't want it to be negative in any way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Man, we're getting deep here, Russell. We just
We're trying. Now, I got some questions for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go back. We know each other from, a childhood friend of mine, your cousin,
Right.
Scotty.
Right.
And similar to Jason, who's on the podcast with you, we all lived in the same neighborhood. Jason lived right across from me. And then Scotty was 2 or 3 doors down.
That's true.
Kinda-
He lived right across the street from you, didn't he? I forgot about that.
And so I describe Jason as my first friend. Now, did I meet him
Wow.
first? I don't know, but we're all born, and then at some point we become aware that we're alive. But so I don't remember meeting Jason or Scotty, but they're the first ones I knew. But it was funny. Jason lived right across the street from me until, I don't know, maybe kindergarten, first grade, and then he moved far away.
I should text him to see if he wants to come on the
We
podcast.
should he moved 1 mile down the road. He didn't even leave the road, the same street, But
Wow.
when you're 5, he might as well move to Iowa. So he was my best buddy. He moved 1 mile to the other end of the neighborhood, and I basically never saw him again. And so it wasn't until I grew up I thought, Mom, Dad, why did you let me lose a friendship over one? I could have ridden my bike down there, Gene. I don't know what I'm doing. So he was my first buddy that I remember. But then Scotty across the street was my nearest and dearest for kind of elementary, middle school, and we were together all the time. And so you would show up as my buddy's cousin. So cousin Gene's coming over, and I don't know how often you were there, but a couple times a year I get to see you. And I want to ask you about this because when I think of you, this is what I think of, and I don't know if it's a real memory or not. I think of you and your family in a convertible. Did y'all have a convertible? Because I picture y'all in a convertible. Was that ever a thing?
No, we didn't.
Was your car ever red? I picture y'all with a red car in my buddy Scotty's brown house. And I don't know if there was ever a red car, but whenever I think of Gene, there's a red car. I thought it was a convertible there as a kid. Do you have it in it? What kind of car could I even be thinking of?
All right, now here's what I'll give you. And I have a strange memory. My wife would attest to this, that I call it a random access memory.
Sure.
That is absolutely phenomenal pre 20 years old.
Sure.
And is not so great 2 minutes ago. But we were the oversized vans that everybody had back then in the 80s. I'm sure y'all had them.
Sure. And Scotty's dad did. It was like his was like a blue custom van that he washed every weekend, and I remember that. But yes,
was. Yep, the old blue van. I can tell you a few stories about that van, including one of my favorite. And I'm going to get to your question, by the way.
Okay, good.
We were hanging out one morning, and he decided that he wanted to show me how to take it in and out of park and put it in neutral and let it roll a little bit.
Okay, great.
And you know me, I'm like Mr. Follow the rules for the most part kid.
Sure.
I'm just like, what are we doing here? What's he getting me into? So he gets in the car and he puts it out and puts neutral, put it in whatever. And he pops the hood. Hey, look at the motor. So we get out and look at the motor. Okay, next morning I'm going to church with him.
Sure.
As we're driving by, or as we're driving down the road, all of a sudden the hood just goes flap.
No!
Against the windshield. And his mom, the first thing out of his mom's mouth was, Scotty, what did you do? It wasn't even a question to him, you know?
Sweet Vicky. We were best of buddies, but yes, similar to you. I'm a rule follower, and Scotty was always getting us into trouble. I'm like, why? We went to church together. I don't want to get in trouble. My brother was a troublemaker. Scotty, I love him. He was a troublemaker. Quit getting us in trouble. And I got hurt with BB guns and hacksaws and quit it, Scotty. Can we just stop it?
Oh, that's funny. I just thought of another. We decided to ride bikes one day, and you know, your neighborhood, by the way, was sort of my de facto neighborhood because I grew up on just a regular road over. And so one day we were riding bikes, and he decided he wanted to leave the neighborhood. So so I'm like, all right. So we're just going out. Yeah, here we go. And so we're going out, and he takes me all the way to where that Ingalls used to be. And I'm sure you know that.
Sure.
And so we're riding around there. I couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 years old. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, what kind of trouble? Am I going to die out here today? Because I have no idea.
We're dying.
Yeah, I mean, kids don't understand. We didn't have the internet. There's no phones on us. Yes. We're just going out there riding around.
We're just going to Ingalls. We're going to the grocery store. What are we doing?
We're driving around in the public near cars, just on our bikes, doing whatever. Sure. And I had a certain point where I was like, I just need to go home right now before I get serious trouble.
So when Scotty and I were buddies, we would so often leave, like kind of out of the neighborhood was a little gas station called the Magic Market.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
It may still be there. And then, a little further was the Ingalls grocery store. And so there was a time that I had a bike, but at some point my bike was in disrepair. So I borrowed his sister's, Crystal's pink and gray 10-speed girls bike. And we would go.
Nice.
He always wanted to go to Magic Market or go to Ingalls. I never had any money. So I'm like, okay, great, let's go. It was something to do. And he would buy the dumbest things. He would get like a Dr. Pepper and a pickle. Why are you buying pickles? Quit buying pickles. But we would go. And one of my favorite stories coming back from that Ingalls, which was just a slight, like flat, occasional decline, is I got on Crystal's bike a mile from my house, and we coasted out of the parking lot, and then just kind of shimmying the wheel back and forth, not pedaling, but keeping momentum at least a little bit, because every now and then you get a little bit of a downhill, then you flatten. I made it the whole way, basically a mile, from a grocery store all the way back to his house, never pedaling that bicycle one time. And try not to get hit by a car, because you're worried you're going to get hit on the highway, and it's not helping when you're shaking the wheel back and forth, trying to keep it going. Yeah. So
I think that was because I knew in my head as we were over there at the Ingalls, my mom would not want me here. And I'm not even.
What are we doing?
I'm pretty sure Vicky doesn't want him here, but he's just here.
Yes. Don't hurt your cousin Gene. Take Gene home. Get off the highway.
You know, the Lord provided, and I got out of that. And, you know,
so good.
Your question though.
I want to know. So there was no convertible. Was there ever a red car?
Yes. My mom had. This could have been your 6th grade time period. I don't know, because my mom had one of those old 80s IROC Camaros that was red.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. You have no idea. I loved the Camaro so much. I still remember there was one. My grandmother lived off of Jimmy Carter Boulevard, kind of closer into Atlanta. Oh, yeah. And there was, I remember at this one gas station, I don't know who drove it, but it was just a perfectly black, freshly waxed Camaro. And obviously Camaros were all the things, like a Mustang. They were everywhere. But this one, it was just like, yes, similar to, you know, if you grew up in the 80s and you see Back to the Future, the truck at the end, that Toyota, the garage door comes up or whatever. And it's like, yes, this vehicle is everything I wanted it to be. So your mom got to drive a hot vehicle like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sherry she's not a typical mom. My mom is not eat your greens. And I need to have the, you know, back in the day, station wagon for my car.
Sure.
She liked, I mean, she wasn't like a, you know, hot rodder, but she liked cool cars, and she loved the color red. And so she had a red Camaro. And
that makes me so happy.
You know,
that makes me so happy.
A funny story, in 8th grade, I broke my ankle, different trail here, but in 8th grade, I broke my ankle in chorus of all things. Yeah. And
how does a person break their ankle in chorus?
You know, if you sit on stage, what we used to call Indian style, crisscross applesauce.
Applesauce, right.
Your legs tend to fall asleep if you do it for an entire choral session, the entire you know, play. And then when you got to get up to do the singing, my legs were still asleep, and I ended up turning them.
Down he goes. Sorry about that. Oh.
But I just remember it was funny because I had a buddy that commented, because he, you know, helped me to get my bag and carried it for me while I was crutching. He was like, "Man, your mom's got a cool car. Are y'all rich?" And I was like, "No, we're not rich." She just like,
oh, that's so good. It was fun. I don't know how often you and I would see one another as kids, and so. To put it this way, is silly, but this was like my little kid brain. But like, you kind of forget, we're so immediate minded as kids, or at least I was, that I would sometimes forget other things. So I'd forget other realities. And so I'd kind of forget that Gene exists. And then you would come back like, I remember Gene, as though, you know, you're a mythical figure. Like, Gene is here. So, but it was fun. And I don't have a great deal of memory of our interactions together.
Right.
But I can just picture you being there. I remember going to those neighbors in that neighborhood, knocking on the door. Can so-and-so come out to play? Can so-and-so play? And those were some fun times.
Yeah, I do remember that neighborhood. Like I said, it was my de facto neighborhood in a lot of ways, because I grew up next door to a cousin who was probably my best friend. And that was about the only other social outside of school that I had, was going to y'all's neighborhood. And I got to know Scotty. He lived across the street from, I'm sure you were good friends with the Brown family.
Sure.
Russell over there, or another Russell.
Well, so it's funny. I grew up, the only other Russell I knew happened to be my next door neighbor. So it was fun. And you mentioned Hot Rod's, his dad, nicknamed Hot Rod. And I mean, what a great nick. Can it be any better than that for a mechanic? What's your name? Hot Rod. Yes, please. And thank you. So it's so good.
And I remember us playing basketball right outside of your house. You had a basketball court there.
Yes.
And we had to move away for cars when they're coming.
Right.
I can remember the weirdest little details, because I can remember walking into your house. I think your mom and dad had two twisty recliners, and your dad was in one
Yeah,
of them watching
sure.
TV. Uh,
Yes.
your brother, I think that he may have dated my cousin
Oh,
Michelle at one
well, that's
point.
that is true. That is true. I forgot. See, I sometimes forget the connections,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's
My other cousin Brian and his
yes,
sister Michelle and Ashley lived in your neighborhood as well.
that's so good.
Yeah.
It's so neat to think about, and I I have such fond memories of those times,
Hmm.
and they were just never replicated. Sometime my early on in my high school career, ninth grade, 10th grade, I can't quite remember. I think it was ninth, might have been 10th. Um, we moved from Stone Mountain, Gwinnett County to South Gwinnett, just 15 or 20 minutes away. Um, but I didn't want to transfer, so I stayed at Shiloh, but I'm kind of removed from the community in respect. So then I'm kind of straddling two different places. I'm not fully Snellville. I should have probably just made the jump to South Gwinnett, but didn't because I was chicken. So I stay at Shiloh, but kind of leaving behind the geographic, location, um, and then living in Snellville and not really connecting there. I don't quite know where I was going with that story, but
Sure.
um, but I look back so fondly. Oh yeah, here we go. My mom was convinced we just needed a bigger house, which I don't think we did. My brother was close to graduating from high school and he wasn't going to be there anyway. And 2 or 3 years later, I was gone. You don't need a bigger house. If you were going to have a bigger house, you should have had it when we were little, not as we're all about to leave. So I always, was always home. And it's the only home I ever have dreams of, even after all these years. I've been gone for 30 years. I
Mm.
never dream of any other place I've ever lived. I always dream of what for us was the little blue house. And I drive through there I don't know, once every year or two. And I miss it. You know, they were starter homes, and there were only two designs in the neighborhood. There was the ranch, and then there was a
Mm.
split level, and that was
Hmm.
it. And then kind of your choice of color. But I like it. I miss it. They don't even make houses like that, so it's kind of hard. Houses are so hard to get into now. We had yards, so
Yeah.
we had an inexpensive house, but a lot of yard. And now, and I get it, the economics of it. It just makes sense to have bigger homes on smaller
Postage
plots of
stamp.
land.
Yep.
Yes, but gone are the yards and gone is playing outside, because all the
Mm.
grown-ups lament kids go outside and play. Okay, where? You don't want me playing in the street, and no
In
one's got
my
to. Yeah,
10-foot.
exactly. And everybody used to have a chain link fence so you could see everything. You had sight lines, so even if your
Uh,
kid was 300 yards away, you knew where they were. You could see them.
mm.
Now your kid can be 30 feet from the front door, but because everybody's got a privacy fence, who knows where they are? And it's just a different time. Go out and play and do
Yeah.
what? There's nowhere to go.
I never thought about the chain link fence that way. I have a privacy fence in my yard, and we built it specifically because we didn't want people seeing our kids in our backyard, and it keeps
Sure.
them whatever. But I never thought about the chain link fence for that reason, that it kind of gives everybody sight.
Yeah, it did. Because so I just remember all of our friends. I could look outside and see, is Scotty home? Is Russell Brown home? Is Jason? I
Yeah.
could just see. And because oftentimes you would see play happening and then you would go play. And now it's like you almost have to have a scheduled time
Mm.
to get together. And that just was not the case when we were kids growing up. You kind of looked around, you listened down. Do I hear anything? Do I see anything? I'm going to go find the fun.
Yeah.
As opposed
Yeah.
now you have to have appointed viewing, you have to have appointed playtime. It's challenging. It's challenging.
I think that you would agree with me on this because I imagine there are people that are under 30, heck, under 35, maybe
Yeah.
under 30, and they don't know what we're talking about here. This is like a foreign language of 80s
Sure.
and 90s childhood here.
Sure.
Um, I point to the movie Goonies as about the closest representation you'll get to the randomness of childhood in that period.
Yeah, that's
I don't.
probably true. Yeah, to just set out on an adventure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to involve, you know, criminal hijinks
No. No.
and
No.
stolen treasure and all
But the
these things.
bicycles,
Yes, all these
people
things.
randomly walking to your house just to say hello.
Yes, totally,
Yeah.
totally. My our house growing up, we converted the garage at the time of building into the den. So
Mm.
we didn't even use our front door. What would have been the garage door was a glass door that was kept unlocked all the time. Day or night, didn't matter. We're home, didn't matter. People would come and go. Are we home? Doesn't matter. Just the door's open. Come in, leave a note, have some tea, enjoy yourself. And I miss those days. I wish we could have more of that. Similar to when you're at the office or you're at school. I don't need you to commit 3 or 4 hours to be with me. Give me 5 good minutes. And I tried when I became a homeowner. I moved into a new neighborhood. So we were all a lot of us were first-time home buyers. And I was like, let's just be buddies. I think you're welcome to pop in. You do not have to stay for the hour. You're welcome to do so. But sometimes it's like, well, I don't want to stop by because I feel guilty leaving. You don't have to feel guilty about anything. I'm happy to have whatever time you offer. Leave, don't leave. It doesn't matter. I don't like that we put such pressure on social engagement now. It is meant to be fun. Right. Why do we make it so serious and regimented? I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like I grew up in a very odd, different time, even different than you because I didn't grow up in a neighborhood, but I did grow up next to my grandfather.
Yeah.
He had a house right next to me. And a practice that they had back in the 80s and 90s that it was just part of life, was he sat on his porch. He had a side porch, kind of like where your car is, but it also had a place for people to sit. He was almost always out there. And the practice of people just coming out there to sit and chat or just sit and talk and hang out.
That's it.
Yeah.
Is there anything better? I mean, we're just all craving that. I mean, we're craving that to sit and just spend life together. Tell me about your day. What do you think of this? And then you talk politics and the economy and sports and so-and-so broke their leg and or silly things. Did you see the new whatever? I love those things. I don't need a pre-planned activity. I even tell this to my friends now. No one ever takes me up on it. Maybe I need to work on my personality. But we all have to go grocery shopping. Why don't we just go grocery shopping together? I'm happy to tag along. I'm not trying to interrupt you. I just like to be in the company of the people I enjoy. I don't need you to do anything other than what you're doing, but I would love to be a part of it as you do it, which I guess kind of gets back to what I said about radio. I don't want to interrupt your life. I just want to witness your life and add to your life. And if you're making a run to Raising Cane's, can I come along and let's get some chicken?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm about to wrap it up here because I actually need to go eat. But,
good. Is it fair to ask what's for dinner? Can I ask you this?
The wife is making chili, and I can smell it through the air vents.
Well, we will. Can you give me a 10-second, 20-second description of what makes wife's chili so good?
Well, believe it or not, she basically does a carbon copy of my mom's recipe, which is basically. I've got to remember this. You do like a large cup of tomato sauce.
Yeah.
I believe it's either a half pound or a pound of ground beef.
Sure.
You do I do a half onion. You could do a whole onion if you want to, or onion powder, and then you add 2 cans of kidney bean. If you want or can, 2 or 1 can of chili bean. I usually do 2 chili bean, 1 kidney bean, and just vary it on that. And the secret sauce is pretty much McCormick's. They make a chili mix. You throw that in there.
Are you going cornbread? Are you going crackers? Are you going Fritos? Are you just like, don't leave me alone? Just give me a bowl of chili cheese, sour cream. What are you doing?
Yeah, I just do the cheese and the sour cream and a little bit. I usually add either potato chips or some sort of thing like that. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I won't keep you. This, Gene, has been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
For having me and eat so much chili.
Well, I tell you what we'll do. If you're up for it, Russell, I'll have you on again. Maybe 3-6 months from now, and we'll chat again.
That'll be great. And I'll have a bowl of chili. I saw them do this with the pranksters. What are the pranksters? The TV show, the Impractical Jokers. They sometimes have dinner parties where they sit. Everybody's having the same thing from their own Zoom location, Skype location, and so we'll have a chili party 6 months from now.
All right, Russell. Have a good one, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gene. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.